the belt stars of Orion. Again, echoing this important geometry. This is now another graphical way to show this. On December 21, 2012, the alignment is exact. On that night, if you look at noon across the sun, at high noon, you'll be looking toward the center of the galaxy. If you turn around and look at midnight on the same night, you're looking directly at Orion. That, of course, shows up in, of all things, the official logo of Kennedy's Apollo program to the moon. This is a NASA patch. This, when I saw this finally and realized what it all meant, it was like, oh my God, it's the Emily Dickinson thing again. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Unless you have the background, unless you have the context, you're not going to figure this stuff out. Well, it gets even better. Because in 2004, this president suddenly says, we got to go back to the moon. Oh my God, we've got to go back to the moon. And he initiates at NASA headquarters in January an amazing program called Project Constellation. Well, Constellation, besides all this cute stuff, you know, the NASA logo and, you know, Earth, Moon, Mars, it's got the 3 belt stars of Orion, and this represents, of course, the Orion Nebula. Orion. Oh, and by the way, notice this. This is important, okay? Because they then called the key spacecraft that's going to succeed the shuttle, surprise, surprise, Orion. And when you do this little number, you look at the NASA logo. Now, why is this important? Because in the Egyptian, Orion is really Osiris, the god of resurrection and death in the Egyptian mythology, which has to do with cycles. You die and then you're reborn. Orion, Osiris is the guy. Well, in Egyptian, it's not spelled Osiris or Orion, it's spelled Asar, A-S-A-R. So every time you see an A, I mean, look at this. This is Asar, reiterating that in fact Asar is Osiris, is Orion. And we find in the NASA logo, I always wondered about the NASA logo, and then I had a kind of an insight from a film that was done by Jose Escamilla. Probably the only important useful thing in the entire film was someone pointed out that this symbol, in fact, is this. It's another A. NASA itself is dedicated to Orion, to Osiris, to Asar, and to the alignment of Orion as a celestial clock that marks midnight, December 21, 2012. So, in essence, NASA is an agency devoted to 2012. No wonder the morning after our special, they came out and attacked us. They had to. Someone was so bright and wanted us to connect the dots and everybody else to connect the dots, because you don't do that in Washington unless, in fact, you want to do exactly the opposite of what you're doing. And the guy behind doing the opposite is Barack Obama, because it's his NASA now and his space agency and his agenda, whatever that agenda is. At least that's my model, and I'm looking at how the dots connect. And science is nothing if it's not prediction, so you predict what happens next. And what's going to happen next is going to be an amazing set of revelations from Obama vis-a-vis NASA through Charlie Bolden in the next few months concerning mind-blowing stuff. And that's about all I can say, because I don't have any more time to say anything more until we do the next conference, and then I'll tell you more of the story. Now, where this meets the road is the physics. Remember, the physics is symbolically represented by entwined tetrahedra, representing the force structure in rotating planets, emerging at 19.5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, isn't it interesting that if you put the Orion logo of the new missions back to the moon, by the way, Constellation has got to refer to Orion. What could you possibly have called a program Constellation without really giving it away, except that it had to be Orion? When you do this, you wind up with that. So at every level, the connection between Giza the cosmic clock, the countdown to 2012, the alignment, celestial alignment, which is your ultimate cosmic clock, and NASA's overwhelming fascination with Egyptian mythology and with the representations of what's going on the plateau, it all comes together in this symbology over and over and over again, which of course is why NASA had to come out the morning after the special and say, those guys are nuts. Except they didn't have to. By doing that, they have elevated the discussion and forced a lot of people who would never even have given it a second thought to begin to ask the question that we ask in the book, what did NASA know and when did it know it about 2012? Well, my thesis today is that NASA itself was formed as an agency by Eisenhower, the intermediate president between Truman, who first figured out we got a problem, Houston, Eisenhower, who set in motion the International Geophysical Year and set up NASA and all that, and then John Kennedy, whose job it was to take all this, put it together, and begin an active plan to do something to change what otherwise could potentially occur. That's the model. And then, because he was going to share this with the Russians, those evil, nasty commies that the CIA could not stand, and we'll get to why they couldn't stand them in a minute, he was killed in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, 46 years ago tomorrow. Does the story end there? No. Because this is the thesis. This is, if you take away nothing else from this morning, this is what I want you to take away. If Apollo's ultimate dark mission was indeed to bring back exotic technology from the moon, to somehow save the Earth from 2012, was Kennedy's belated discovery of this, i.e. NASA's real motivation for Apollo, the hidden reason the president quietly decided to turn around and share the lunar program with our enemies, only a few months after his high-profile congressional announcement. And thus did those equally secret, protracted negotiations with Nikita Khrushchev over Soviet participation in Apollo for those 3 long years, his entire administration, we now know from Sorensen, was this back-and-forth dialogue. When Khrushchev finally said yes, which was on November 12th, 63. How do we know this? Because of his son, Sergei, says that's when that happened. And that's when the NSC memos are written to Webb from Kennedy. Is that, in fact, why he was killed? And my answer is yes. But it gets more intriguing. Because John Kennedy tried to tell everyone in an extraordinarily symbolic way what he was doing while he was doing it, and that message is still going on, and it's right in front of us, and we never really noticed and understood what it meant, and it all has to do with Air Force One. Now, the standard story is that the design of Air Force One, or the redesign, actually, the color scheme and all that, came about because of Jackie Kennedy and her interest in redecorating the White House. And, she was this, good little wifey who was doing the decorating thing. And, her decorating thing extended to the airplane and the image and Camelot and all that. History actually is quite a bit more interesting. As I started looking at this, and I'll tell you bluntly what got me intrigued. What got me intrigued was the fact that Eisenhower had a 707 from Boeing and flew around under the Military Air Transport Service, MATS. And it was the Air Force duty to keep the president safe and to fly him here and fly him there and all that. And he flew in a plane like this, which had bright orange, silver markings, Air Force markings all over it. And the word is that Kennedy thought this was too regal. He wanted to do something that was more democratic, something more in touch with the history of the United States. So he basically said to Jackie, do something with the airplane. That's the story. I found out something quite a bit more intriguing and different. Because if you start looking at the tail numbers of these aircraft, you begin to see a pattern. The thing that really caught my eye was this. What is that? That is the precessional cycle of the planet Earth. right on the tail of the most famous Air Force One